Pack your things. You have until noon. That was all my son said to me. No explanation. No apology. Just those 7 words, delivered at my own kitchen table, in the house I had paid for with 31 years of working double shifts at the plant. I sat there holding my coffee mug, the old blue one my wife Eleanor had given me on our 20th anniversary, the one with the tiny chip on the handle she always said gave it character. And I looked at my son Daniel's face. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the table, jaw tight, hands folded in front of him like he was in a business meeting and not telling his 64-year-old father to get out. His wife, Vanessa, stood in the doorway behind him. She was looking directly at me, and she was smiling. I want you to understand something before I go any further. I am not a man who cries easily. I spent 31 years on a factory floor. I buried my wife 18 months ago after watching her fight cancer for 2 years. I held it together through all of it. But sitting at that table, looking at my son's averted eyes and his wife's quiet smile, I felt something crack open in my chest that I don't have a proper word for. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something closer to vertigo, like the floor had dropped out from under the world I thought I knew. I set the mug down very carefully. I'm sorry, I said. Can you say that again? Daniel cleared his throat. We need the space, Dad. Vanessa and I have talked about it. It's time for you to find your own place. Your own place. As if this wasn't my place. As if I hadn't built the back porch with my own hands the summer Daniel turned 8. As if Eleanor hadn't planted every rose bush in the front yard. As if the mortgage hadn't been paid off with money I had earned before Daniel was old enough to shave. This is my house, I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. Vanessa stepped into the kitchen then. She moved past Daniel and sat down across from me, folding her hands on the table in a way that struck me as rehearsed. Harold, she said. Using my name in that particular tone she had soft, slightly pitying. The tone you use with someone who isn't quite keeping up. We had the deed transferred into Daniel's name 2 years ago. You signed the paperwork yourself, don't you remember? And here is the thing that still shames me when I think about it. I did remember signing something. Eleanor had just started her 2nd round of chemo. I was exhausted, in a way that went beyond physical. Daniel had come to me with a folder of papers and said something about estate planning, protecting the house in case of medical debt, keeping the family's assets safe. I had trusted him. He was my son. I signed where he pointed. I had not read what I was signing. I looked at Daniel. He was still staring at the table. Daniel, I said. He said nothing. Daniel, look at me. He looked up. And I saw it then. Not cruelty. Not exactly. But something almost worse. Discomfort. The expression of a man who knows he is doing something wrong and has decided to do it anyway because it is easier than doing what is right. He had made his choice long before that morning. Vanessa had simply made it easy for him to live with it. You have until noon, he said again, and stood up from the table. I packed 1 bag. I am not sure why I only packed 1. I think some part of me believed this couldn't be real. That I would walk out the front door and walk back in an hour later and find it had all been some strange argument that we would work through. I took my clothes, my shaving kit, the blue coffee mug, and a photograph of Eleanor from our wedding day. I left everything else. It was a Tuesday in November. I remember that precisely because the oak tree in the front yard had dropped most of its leaves, and they were piled against the porch steps, and I thought, absently, that somebody needed to rake them before they got wet and compacted. Then I realized that somebody was no longer me. I sat in my truck at the end of the driveway for a long time. I had $43 in my wallet. My pension check wasn't due for another 11 days. I had not thought about money in years. The house was paid off. My needs were simple. Eleanor and I had lived quietly. I had no credit card of my own. After Eleanor passed, I had closed the joint account and moved what little savings we had into a basic checking account at our local branch. There was maybe $200 in it. I was 64 years old, sitting in a truck with 1 bag, with nowhere to go, in November. I reached into the glove compartment looking for the insurance card, and my hand found something else. A small white envelope, The kind that comes with a greeting card. My name was written on the front in Eleanor's handwriting. I sat there holding it for a very long time before I could open it. Inside was a short note and a debit card I had never seen before. The note said, "If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I hope I'm mistaken about what that something might be. Use this card. Go to First Fidelity on Carpenter Street. Ask for a woman named Patricia Okafor. Tell her Eleanor sent you. She will take care of everything. I love you more than you ever knew, Harold." I read it 3 times. Eleanor had been gone for 18 months. She had written this note before she died. She had known or feared something that she had never told me, and she had quietly, without a word, prepared for it. I pressed the note against my chest and I sat there in the truck and I finally cried. Not for long, but I cried. Then I started the engine and I drove to Carpenter Street. First Fidelity was a small branch, not one of the big glass and marble banks downtown. It had a wood-paneled lobby and a waiting area with upholstered chairs and the quiet atmosphere of a place that took its time with people. I walked up to the front desk and asked for Patricia Okafor. The young man at the desk looked up with the professionally pleasant expression of someone about to explain that Patricia is unavailable. "Can I take a message?" And then a woman appeared from a back office as if she had been waiting. She was in her 50s, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and an expression of calm authority. "Mr. Harold Marsh?" she said. I blinked. "Yes, I'm Patricia. I've been expecting your visit, though I hoped it would be under different circumstances." She glanced at my bag, at the coat I hadn't bothered to button properly, and her expression shifted not to pity, but to something more like quiet resolve. "Please come to my office." I followed her down a short hallway. She closed the door behind us and gestured to a chair. I sat. She sat across from me, folded her hands, and looked at me steadily. "Your wife came to see me about 2 years ago," she said. She was very clear about what she wanted and very clear about why. "She asked me to keep this account confidential until the day you came in." She said. Patricia paused, and something moved across her face. She said, "My husband trusts people the way good men do, but trust is not always wisdom. I want him to be safe." I couldn't speak. Patricia reached into a drawer and produced a folder. She opened it on the desk between us and turned it to face me. "Mrs. Marsh opened this account in your name 2 years ago. She transferred into it a portion of investments she had been managing quietly since before your marriage, assets she had inherited from her own father and grown over the years. She never mentioned them to you?" I shook my head slowly. Eleanor had grown up with very little. Her father had been a difficult man. I had assumed there was no inheritance to speak of. "She was modest," Patricia said simply. "And she was careful." She let me look at the number at the bottom of the page. I looked at it for a long time. Then I looked at it again, to confirm I was reading it correctly. I want to be careful here about what I say, because I am not a person who believes money is the point of any story worth telling. But I will say this. The number on that page meant that I would never be cold, never be hungry, never be at the mercy of anyone's goodwill for the rest of my life. Eleanor had seen to that, quietly, patiently, without a single word of it to me. She had built a floor beneath my feet for exactly the moment when someone tried to pull it out from under me. I looked up at Patricia. "She knew," I said. "She knew what Daniel might do." Patricia chose her words carefully. She said she loved her son, but she said she had watched certain patterns developing for several years. She wanted you to be protected regardless of what happened. I thought about Vanessa, the way she had smiled at me over Daniel's shoulder, the rehearsed way she had folded her hands on the table, the papers I had signed while my wife was fighting for her life. I thought about Eleanor quietly meeting with a bank manager, quietly arranging accounts, quietly writing a letter and sealing it in a white envelope, and placing it in the glove compartment of my truck where she knew I would eventually find it. She had loved me with a thoroughness that I was only now beginning to understand. "What do I do now?" I asked. Patricia leaned forward slightly. "Now," she said, "we call the attorney." Her name was Renata Cross, and she arrived at the bank within the hour, which told me Patricia had already been in contact with her. Renata was a compact woman in a dark blazer who shook my hand with a grip that meant business and asked me two precise questions before she sat down. Did I have the original signed note Eleanor had left me, and did I have any documentation of what I had signed 2 years ago when Daniel told me it was estate planning? I had Eleanor's note. I did not have the other document. Renata nodded as if this was what she had expected. That's fine. We have other avenues. She set her briefcase on the table and opened it with a sound like a sentence being punctuated. Mrs. Marsh was also a client of mine. She was thorough. Let me explain what we have. What we had, it turned out, was considerably more than I had understood when I'd signed those papers at the kitchen table. Eleanor had retained Renata specifically to review the estate planning documents Daniel had brought to me. Renata had reviewed them. She had flagged several issues. Most importantly, she had quietly, at Eleanor's direction, prepared a countervailing document, a trust, established in my name, covering the house and several other assets which Eleanor had executed before her death, and which took legal precedence over the deed transfer Daniel had arranged. In simple terms, Daniel thought he owned the house. He did not. It had been placed in a trust that protected my right to live there until I chose otherwise. The deed transfer your son arranged, Renata said, in a tone of voice that was professionally neutral, in a way that somehow conveyed deep judgment, has several problems. We will be filing to void it. Additionally, the circumstances of how it was obtained while you were under significant stress, caring for a terminally ill spouse, give us considerable grounds. I sat back in my chair. I thought about Daniel standing at the kitchen table that morning, the 7 words, the averted eyes, the practice speech Vanessa had clearly written for him. I thought about them at that house right now. Vanessa probably already redecorating in her head. Daniel probably convincing himself he'd done what was necessary, what was practical, that old men needed to be managed. I thought about Eleanor in her last months, weak, struggling to breathe, in pain, somehow finding the energy to sit in this office, to talk to this attorney, to plan carefully for the person she was leaving behind. What are my options? I asked Renata. She looked at me steadily. You can return to the house immediately. We can have documentation in Daniel's hands within 24 hours, establishing that the deed transfer is being contested and that you have full legal right to occupancy. He will have very few options to resist. And if he does resist, then we proceed. The trust document is solid. Mrs. Marsh was very specific about what she wanted protected and why. Renata paused. There's one more thing. In reviewing the original transfer documents your son brought to you, we found that the notarization was irregular. The notary public listed is someone with a documented relationship to your daughter-in-law's family. That is potentially a significant legal problem for your son and his wife. I let that sit for a moment. How significant? That is a conversation for another day, Renata said. Today, the question is simply, do you want to go home? I thought about the question for a long time. I looked at my one bag sitting on the floor beside my chair. I thought about the wet leaves piling up against the porch steps. I thought about Eleanor's rose bushes in the front yard, going into winter, needing to be properly mulched before the frost. Yes, I said. I want to go home. We arrived at the house at 4 in the afternoon. Renata came with me. She knocked on the door rather than letting me use my key, which I understood was intentional, a formal courtesy that also happened to frame the encounter in the correct terms. Daniel opened the door. When he saw Renata standing beside me with a briefcase and an expression of complete composure, the color left his face so quickly and completely that I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Vanessa appeared behind him. Her expression when she saw me was not what I expected. I had expected anger, or more of that quiet superiority. What I saw instead was fear. She had been afraid, I realized, since the beginning. Everything she had done, the papers, the strategy, the careful management of my son had been fear. Fear that they would never have enough. Fear that what I had would somehow diminish what she wanted. Fear dressed up as practicality, as planning, as good sense. It did not make me forgive her, but it made the whole picture clearer. Renata handed Daniel a document. She explained its contents in plain language. She explained the trust. She explained the problems with the deed transfer. She explained the issue with the notarization. She did not raise her voice once. She was extraordinarily calm and extraordinarily precise, and every word landed like a stone being placed, one by one, into a very still pond. Daniel read the document. He read it twice. His hands were not steady. He looked at me. "Dad, not tonight," I said. "I'm going inside now." I picked up my bag. I walked past my son and into my own home. I set the blue coffee mug on the kitchen counter where it had always lived. I hung my coat on the hook by the back door. I turned on the lamp in the living room, the one Eleanor had found at an estate sale in 2009. The one with the amber shade that made the whole room feel like late afternoon. I sat in my chair and I looked at the room that still held the shape of our life together. The books on the shelf she had arranged, and I had never rearranged. The small watercolor above the fireplace she had painted the year we turned 50. The worn arm of the sofa where she used to sit with her legs tucked up under her, reading. She was everywhere in this house. And she had fought for it from the other side of death, quietly and completely. The way she had always done everything she cared about. In the weeks that followed, Renata and her team moved with a thoroughness that would have impressed Eleanor, I think. The deed transfer was voided. The notarization issue was referred to the state bar. Daniel and Vanessa retained their own attorney. I never asked who paid for it, and there were letters exchanged and meetings held that I was mostly shielded from. I was told what I needed to know when I needed to know it. Daniel called me once, about 3 weeks in. I answered because he is still my son, and I am still his father. And that is a thing that doesn't simply end. He said, "I'm sorry, Dad." I sat with those words for a moment. "I know you are," I said. "I think you've been sorry about a lot of things for a long time, Daniel. I think the difference now is that you got caught." I paused. "I'm not able to tell you where we go from here. That's going to take time." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "She knew, didn't she?" "Mom knew." "Yes," I said. "She knew." Another silence. "She loved you more than she ever told you," I said. "She told me that once, near the end. She said she was afraid she hadn't shown it enough. I want you to know that." I stopped. "But love doesn't mean there are no consequences. Your mother understood that better than anyone." I hung up and sat in the amber light of the living room for a long time. In the spring, I mulched Eleanor's rose bushes. They came back strong. 6 of them along the front fence, red and yellow, and one pale pink that she had been particularly proud of. I raked the lawn. I repainted the porch rail. I did all the things a man does when he is taking care of something that belongs to him. My neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Frank, who had shoveled my driveway twice during those weeks when everything was unsettled, started coming by on Sunday mornings. We drink coffee on the back porch and argue about baseball and say very little of importance, which is the best kind of conversation. I still use the blue mug with the chip on the handle. Some mornings I hold it and think about Eleanor, about the kind of love that plans ahead, that thinks carefully, that says what it needs to say in a sealed envelope placed quietly in a glove compartment, trusting that the right person will find it at the right moment. She gave me back everything I had built. She gave it back to me before she even left. I don't know that I deserve a love like that. I don't know that any of us deserve the best of what we're given. But I know what to do with it now. You hold on to it. You take care of it. And if someone tries to take it from you, you remember that the person who loved you most already thought of that. She already thought of everything.